A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. Imagine you are sitting in a library filled with tens of thousands of volumes, some of them 1600 years old, written in a mix of archaic Hebrew and Aramaic. You are looking for every single instance where a specific legal concept, say, the definition of a public domain, for the purposes of the Sabbath, is discussed across 2,711 double-sided pages of the Talmud.
It really is a watershed moment for digital humanities. Today's prompt from Daniel is about the Sefaria project launching their Model Context Protocol Server, or MCP. It's essentially the first major AI protocol server in the Jewish world, and it's changing how we interact with the Tanakh, the Talmud, and thousands of years of rabbinic literature. It really is a watershed moment, Corn. Today's prompt from Daniel is about the launch of the Sefaria MCP server. For those who haven't been tracking the specific plumbing of AI lately, MCP stands for the Model Context Protocol.
And I'm Corn. I've been watching Herman vibrate with excitement over documentation, which is usually a sign that something actually cool is happening under the hood. By the way, if the flow of this conversation feels particularly sharp today, it might be because Google Gemini 3 Flash is writing our script. We're deep in the AI weeds today, literally and figuratively.
It's the perfect model for this, honestly. But back to Sefaria. For those who don't know, Sefaria is the massive open-source digital library of Jewish texts. They have over 100 million words of Hebrew and English content. But the big news isn't just that the text exists. It's been online for years. It's how it's being exposed to large language models through this MCP server.
Why is an MCP server a watershed moment, rather than just another technical update? Or you relied on the model's internal training data, which, let's be honest, can be a bit hallucinatory when you get into the weeds of 3rd century Aramaic legal debates.
You type in a keyword, it gives you a list of results, and you click through them. But the AI, the large language model, doesn't know what's in those books unless it was part of its training data. And even if it was, LLMs have a tendency to hallucinate specific citations or conflate different commentators because the corpus is so dense and linguistically complex. It basically allows an AI assistant to say, I don't know the answer to this, but I have a tool called Search Talmuds that can find it for me.
It's confident, but it's often wrong because it's working from a fuzzy memory of the internet. What can the AI actually do now that it couldn't do in December?
When you use an MCP-enabled assistant, the AI doesn't rely on its training memory to tell you what Rashi says. Instead, it sees that you're asking a question about a Jewish text, and it uses a standardized tool to reach out to Sefaria's server, retrieve the precise Hebrew and English text, and then analyze it. It's moving from guessing based on patterns to performing real-time research on primary sources.
So, it's like giving the AI a pair of glasses and a library card. It doesn't have to remember the book, it just has to know how to read, the one it just pulled off the shelf. Does it just dump a bunch of text at the AI, or is there some intelligence in the retrieval?
If it determines that the Sefaria tool is relevant, it sends a structured query to the Sefaria MCP server. The server then looks at its database, which, keep in mind, contains over 100 million words of text, and sends back a structured response containing the text, the metadata, the translator's name, and the links to related commentaries. The AI then processes that verified data to give you an answer.
I want to dig into the 100 million words part. Sefaria isn't just the Bible, right? It's the Tanakh, the Mishnah, the 2 Talmuds, the Midrash, the Halakha, the Kabbalah. It's basically the entire Jewish operating system in digital form.
It is. It's the most comprehensive open-source collection of Jewish texts in history. And because it's open source, the metadata is incredibly rich. Every verse in the Torah is linked to the specific place in the Talmud where it's discussed, which is linked to the medieval commentaries like Rashi or Ramban, which is linked to later legal codes like the Shulchan Aruch. The MCP server exposes all of those connections to the AI.
So instead of just searching for a word, the AI can navigate the relationships between texts. It can see the conversation happening across centuries. Does the MCP server fix that, or does it just give the AI more sophisticated ways to lie to us?
If you're studying a page of the Talmud, which for the uninitiated is notoriously difficult because it's written in a shorthand Aramaic and jumps between topics with very little transition, you can now have a conversational partner. You can ask, I'm looking at Tractate Shabbat, page 73, side A.
Okay, I'll give you that. It's a truth tether. But what about the limitations? I know you, Herman. You've probably found 3 things that annoy you about the implementation already.
You know me too well. The main challenge right now is the context window management. Even though the AI can pull all this data, it still has a limit on how much it can hold at once. That's one of the most impressive things about what the Sefaria team has done. The MCP server doesn't just give the AI a raw text dump, it provides endpoints for specific functions. For example, there's an endpoint for getText, which allows the AI to fetch a specific range of verses or lines.
That's where the Chevrolet aspect comes in, right? The traditional Jewish way of learning is in pairs, 2 people arguing over a text. It feels like the Sefaria MCP is trying to turn the AI into a very well-read, if somewhat robotic, study partner.
It allows the AI to see every other text in the library that references the one you're currently looking at. But now you can say to your MCP-enabled assistant, hey, I'm looking at this argument about damages caused by an ox, and I don't understand how the Tosafot commentary is disagreeing with Rashi here. It can map it out in seconds. It can say, in the 13th century, Ramban focused on the mystical implications here, citing these 3 midrashic sources.
See, that's the kind of thing that makes people nervous, though. If the AI can do the heavy lifting of finding the pivot point, do the students actually learn anything? Okay, but let's talk about the hallucination problem again. If the AI is still the one doing the summarizing, couldn't it still mess up the interpretation, even if it has the right text?
That's the boundary we have to be careful about. The MCP server ensures the input is accurate. The AI isn't making up the quote anymore. However, the output, the explanation or the synthesis, is still generated by the LLM. That's why it's so important to view this as a tool for study, not a replacement for authority. In the Jewish world, there's a concept of halakha, which is the practical application of law. No serious person is saying you should ask an AI for a final legal ruling on a complex life and death issue.
I hope you're right, but I suspect there will be some intellectual atrophy for those who rely on it too much. But let's pivot to the practical side. You're a nerd. I'm a sloth who likes things to be easy. Let's talk use cases. I love the idea of the AI as a chevruta, a traditional study partner. Traditionally, you don't study these texts alone. You study with a partner so you can debate and challenge each other.
This is where it gets really fun. Let's say you're looking at the parasha, the weekly reading. I think with MCP, it moves closer to the Chevruta model. Without MCP, the AI was a partner who occasionally lied about what the book said. With MCP, it's a partner who has the book open in front of them. You can say, wait, I don't think that interpretation holds up if you look at what the Tosafot say 3 pages later, and the AI can actually go look at those Tosafot and say, you're right, that does create a contradiction. Let's see how the Maharsha resolves that.
That's a level of depth that most people can't access without years of intensive training. I mean, navigating the Tosafot, the medieval French and German commentaries, is hard enough when you know the language. It's like having a guide who can translate not just the language, but the cultural context in real time.
Or just a curious learner of any background. The barrier to entry for the Talmud has always been the Sea of Aramaic. If you can use an AI that has direct access to Sefaria, you can ask, tell me the story of the oven of Achnai, and the AI can provide the text, the historical context, and then lead you through a discussion of why the majority rule is so central to Jewish law.
It's funny you mention the oven of Achnai. That's the classic story where the rabbis basically tell God that they have the authority to interpret the law on earth, and God laughs and says, "My children have defeated me." It's almost a meta commentary on what we're doing here. taking these ancient, divinely inspired texts and using our most human, silicon-based tools to parse them.
It really is. And the Sefaria team has been very mindful of that. They've been pioneers in the Open Torah movement. They realize that for these texts to stay alive and relevant, they have to be where the people are. In the 2020s and 2030s, people are in the chat interface. If the Torah isn't in the chat interface, it becomes a museum piece.
It's basically giving the AI a sense of genre awareness. I like that. But let's talk about the Jewish world aspect of this. Sefaria is the first, but they won't be the last. Do you see this as a broader trend? I'm curious about the second-order effects here. If every student has this level of power in their pocket, how does that change the way yeshivas, the traditional study halls, actually function?
I'd be shocked if we didn't. Religious texts are the ultimate unstructured data challenge. They are nonlinear, highly intertextual, and deeply dependent on commentary layers. That's the big debate. I think the answer is that it shifts the focus from information retrieval to conceptual synthesis. It's the same thing that happened when calculators entered math classes or when Google entered the classroom. You still need to understand the underlying logic, but you spend less time on the where is this mentioned and more time on the what does this mean. If the AI can find all 30 instances of a legal term in 10 seconds, the student can spend the next hour analyzing the patterns between those instances. It actually raises the bar for what a scholar is.
It's like how chess AI didn't kill chess. It just made everyone much, much better at chess because they could train against the perfect opponent and analyze their mistakes with precision.
And there are specific use cases for scholars that are just mind-blowing. Imagine you're writing a paper on the evolution of the concept of tzedakah charity. You can ask the AI to retrieve all passages in the Mishnah Torah where Maimonides discusses the psychological state of the giver, then find where the Shulchan Aruch modifies those requirements based on the economic conditions of the 16th century. That is a research task that would have taken a PhD candidate months of work in the past.
I can already hear the Sabbath mode jokes coming. Hey AI, is this light switch muktzah? But seriously, the smart home integration is a real thing. We've talked about that in the past, how technology and ancient law collide. And because it's using MCP, the AI can provide the citations. It's not just saying Maimonides said this, it's saying in Laws of Gifts to the Poor, Chapter 10, Halakha 7, Maimonides writes, and then it provides the text.
It really is. And it's not just for the religious side of things. Think about the linguistic value. And you can't have Jewish law without Mizorah, the chain of tradition. One of the endpoints in the Sefaria MCP is for commentary. You can explicitly ask to see the chain of a verse.
I'm thinking about the Ezra use case. Daniel's son is going to grow up in a world where this is just how you learn. He won't remember a time when you had to manually flip through 20 volumes of the Talmud to find a cross-reference. I want to pivot back to the technical nerd side of this for a second. Sefaria is the first, but they won't be the last. Do you see this as a model for other religious or classical traditions?
It is. It democratizes the rabbi's brain. Not that it replaces the rabbi, you still need someone to make the final ethical or legal call, but it gives every person the same search power that used to be reserved for the elite. Oh, it's absolutely the blueprint. Any tradition that relies on a massive interconnected corpus of fixed texts where the relationships between the texts are as important as the texts themselves is a perfect candidate for MCP. The reason Sefaria is first is that they've spent the last decade plus doing the hard work of digitizing and linking the data. You can't just throw a bunch of PDFs at an AI and expect it to work. You need a structured database with a clear schema.
I love the optimism, Ermin, but I'm the sloth here. I have to find the lazy angle. That's the data engineering, part of the story that people often overlook. Everyone talks about the magic of the AI, but the magic is only possible because someone did the unmagical work of tagging 100 million words with metadata.
And that's why this is such a significant moment for digital humanities. It's a proof of concept that you can take a library that's thousands of years old and make it AI native without losing the integrity of the source.
Okay, so we've got scholars doing literature reviews, students finding pivot points in logic, and lazy sloths getting summaries of goat stories. What about the technical users, the people listening who are developers? What does it actually look like to plug into this?
If you're a developer, you basically just point your MCP client like Claude Desktop or a custom Python script to the Sefaria server URL. It's built on top of the Sefaria API, so you'll need an API key if you're doing heavy volume, but for personal use, it's incredibly accessible. One big limitation is what I call the nuance of the Aramaic. Aramaic in the Talmud is highly contextual. The same word can mean we have learned, it was taught, or it's a question, depending on where it sits in the sentence and what the rhythmic flow of the argument is.
That bilingualism part is tricky, right? Because a lot of these texts are interleaved. You'll have a sentence of Hebrew followed by a sentence of English. If the AI doesn't know how to destructure that, it just gets a jumbled mess.
The MCP server handles the cleaning. It can serve just the Hebrew, just the English, or a structured JSON object with both. This means the AI can read the Hebrew for the precise legal terms, but reason in English for the user's benefit. Right. It's like a law clerk who is incredible at finding cases, but occasionally misses the subtle legal theory that connects them. Another limitation is the halakhic authority issue we touched on.
I'm also thinking about the second-order effects you always talk about. If this becomes a standard, does it change the texts themselves? Do we start tagging ancient texts specifically so AI can read them better?
An AI, by default, treats all text as data. It might give you a minority opinion from the 12th century and present it as the answer to your question, not realizing that the law was settled differently 500 years ago. But moving forward, I think we'll see AI native commentaries. Imagine a commentary written today that is specifically designed to be easily parsed by an LLM, providing the metadata of the logic alongside the text.
That's a bit Inception. Why? Humans writing for machines so machines can explain it back to humans. But I guess that's the world we're living in. March 2026, baby.
I actually think it will lead to a renaissance of people engaging with the primary sources. Instead of just reading a summary of the laws of keeping kosher, people can actually go back and see the original debate in the Talmud, with the AI helping them navigate the difficult language. An AI can scan the entire corpus and say, hey, there's a shared linguistic root here that suggests a deeper philosophical connection.
Imagine if your AI assistant via the Sefaria MCP could say, hey, in this week's portion, there's a really interesting linguistic connection between the building of the tabernacle and the creation of the world. Do you want to see the 3 midrashim that discuss this?
That is exactly what I've been doing. It changes the prep time for a sermon or a class. You can ask for unusual connections or historical context that isn't in the standard commentaries. You can even use it for comparative religion within the Jewish tradition.
Well, before we get too insightful and start floating off the ground, let's bring it back to Earth. If someone wants to try this today, right now, what's the hello world for the Sefaria MCP?
The hello world is downloading the Claude desktop app. It's a lot more polite than a real boxing match, but the intellectual sparks are just as bright. And let's talk about cross-referencing. The Talmud is often described as a hypertext before computers existed. A discussion about a lost object in one tractate will suddenly reference a rule about marriage in another tractate. Historically, you had to have a mental map of the whole thing. With MCP, the AI can follow those links instantly. You can say, the Talmud here mentions a ruv. Where else in the entire corpus is that specific legal mechanism used? And it gives you a list of 10 other places, many of which you never would have found on your own.
It's like having a super index. I remember reading that the index was one of the greatest inventions of the medieval world because it allowed people to find information without reading the whole book. This feels like the next leap, the semantic index.
It is. And it's not just for the heavy hitters either. Think about curious learners. Someone who isn't Jewish but is interested in Western civilization. You can't understand the foundations of Western law or ethics without understanding the rabbinic tradition. But until now, that tradition has been locked behind a language barrier. The Sefaria MCP server is a universal translator for human thought. It takes this incredibly insular, complex tradition and makes it accessible to anyone with a curious mind and an internet connection.
I'm thinking about the AI safety and alignment side of this too. We talk a lot about how to make AI ethical. What better way to train an AI on ethics than to give it direct, structured access to thousands of years of ethical debates?
That's a fascinating point. Instead of the AI just learning ethics from Reddit threads or Wikipedia, it can actually see the structured, rigorous process of ethical reasoning in the rabbinic tradition. It can see how people for 2,000 years have wrestled with questions of what is a fair wage, or what are the limits of self-defense, or how do we balance the needs of the individual with the needs of the community. By providing a clean channel to this data via MCP, we're essentially giving the AI a better moral education.
Rabbinic alignment. That's a new one for the AI safety researchers to chew on. But Herman, let's get practical. If I'm a listener right now and I want to try this out, how do I actually do it? Do I need to be a coder? You needed a PhD just to navigate the search syntax.
You can download the Sefaria MCP server from GitHub, it's open source of course, and add it to your configuration file. Once you do that, the Sefaria tool appears in your chat interface. You can just start asking questions.
I'm sold. Even if it just helps me win an argument at the dinner table about whether or not more than one person can use the same toothbrush according to the Talmud.
For the record, the Talmud has a lot to say about communal property and hygiene, but the electronic toothbrush is a very modern response to topic. And yes, the MCP could find that for you in seconds.
You could build a Daf Yomi app that gives you a personalized summary of the daily page of Talmud, or a Sabbath mode, AI that helps you plan your meals based on the specific laws of your community.
You could build a personalized Chevruta that knows exactly what you studied in the past and suggests new topics based on your interests. Hey Korn, I know you liked that discussion about property law last week. There's a related concept in the laws of inheritance that you might find interesting. Want to dive in? It moves the learning journey from a one-size-fits-all curriculum to a truly personalized experience. Number 3, for the curious learners, use it to explore themes. Ask the AI to find weird connections, like the relationship between astronomy and prayer in Jewish law.
But if you have an AI that can turn it into an interactive story or a scavenger hunt, find 3 animals mentioned in this chapter and tell me what the Midrash says about them. It makes it so much more engaging. If it gives you a source, ask it to verify that source using the Sefaria tool. It's a great way to learn how to be a critical thinker in the AI age.
By moving it into a conversational AI interface, we're actually returning it to its roots as a spoken tradition. It's no longer just static ink on a page, it's a living dialogue.
That's a beautiful thought. The digital oral law. I also think about the global aspect. There are Jewish communities and places where there are no physical libraries of these books.
I'm going to steal that phrase for my next blog post, the API for Ancient Wisdom. It's perfect.
But now, you have the library, the librarian, and the study partner all in your phone.
It's the ultimate portability of the tradition. We've always been a people on the move, and our books have always moved with us. Now, the books don't even need physical form.
I'll take it. Big thanks to Daniel for the prompt. This was a great one to dig into. And thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the wheels on this crazy bus.
And a huge thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this show. We couldn't do these deep dives into the digital Talmud without that serverless horsepower.
This has been my Weird Prompts. If you enjoyed this dive into the intersection of AI and religious scholarship, we'd love it if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's the best way to help other curious nerds find the show.
But I do think we'll see AI-augmented rabbis. Imagine a rabbi who is preparing a ruling on a complex medical ethics question.
Until next time, keep your prompts weird and your sources verified.
He still makes the decision, but his decision is more informed and more comprehensive, because he didn't miss that one obscure ruling from a 16th century scholar in Italy.
It's the Iron Man suit for the brain. The human is still inside, but they have repulsor beams and targeting sensors for information. This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash, text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, my weird prompts, where our thoughts go from slaw